The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of Zarian 7. 6 cadets sat in silence, looking out at the endless desert below. The planet was nothing but sand, rocks, and scattered dry plants as far as anyone could see. Commander Yijin stood at the front of the ship. His voice was serious as he spoke. "This is your final survival test. You have 3 days to stay alive in this desert. You get basic clothes, 1 water bottle, and emergency food for 1 day. That's all." Dongho, the human cadet, nodded quietly. He had brown hair and calm dark eyes. He wore the same gray uniform as the others, but he looked relaxed while his alien teammates seemed worried. Hyun-woo was from the Zephyrian species. His body looked like it was made of clear blue crystal that caught the light. He tapped his fingers nervously on his water bottle. "This heat will crack my skin," he said. "My people live in cool caves with steady temperatures." Somin came from the water world of Veltar. She had smooth blue-green skin and large eyes that needed to stay wet. She kept blinking and touching the moisture patches on her neck. 3 days without proper water access," she whispered. "I might not make it past day 2. Jae-sung belonged to the insect-like crick species. He had 4 arms and large compound eyes that could see many things at once. "My calculations show the survival rate for our group is only 43%. He said in his clicking voice. "The environment parameters are outside acceptable ranges for most of our species." Nari was a luminar, an energy-based life form that looked like a tall, thin person made of golden light. She flickered weakly as she spoke. "This sun gives the wrong type of energy. It's too harsh. I need gentle, filtered light to survive." Taejin was the largest of the group. He came from the reptilian Sorak people and had thick, scaly green skin. His body temperature changed with his surroundings, and he was already looking sluggish. "Cold blood and desert heat don't mix well," he said slowly. The aliens all looked at Dongho with doubt in their eyes. Hyun-woo spoke first. "I still don't understand why humans are in the Galactic Defense Academy. Your species barely has space travel. You have no special abilities." "Your technology is centuries behind ours," added Jae-sung. "What can primitives like you offer the galaxy?" So-min nodded. "Maybe they should have left you on your home planet where you belong." Dong-ho said nothing. He had heard these comments many times during training. Most aliens thought humans were too simple and weak to join the galactic community. They saw humans as barely evolved creatures who got lucky with basic spaceflight. The ship landed with a soft thud. Sand swirled around. As the doors opened, heat hit them like a wall. The temperature was already over 40 degrees, and the sun was still climbing higher. "Remember," Commander Yujin called out, "your emergency beacons will work if you're about to die. But using them means you fail the test. The pickup point is here in exactly 72 hours. The cadets stepped onto the sand. Immediately, Hyun-woo's crystal skin began to steam slightly. So-min covered her large eyes with her hands. Jae-sung's compound eyes couldn't focus properly in the bright light. Nari's golden glow dimmed as the harsh sunlight overwhelmed her delicate energy systems. Taejin moved very slowly, his cold blood making him sluggish in the heat. The ship took off, leaving them alone in the vast desert. The aliens stood close together, already opening their emergency supplies and checking their equipment. Dong-ho walked a few steps away from the group. He knelt down and picked up a handful of sand, letting it run through his fingers. He looked at the way the wind blew, where shadows fell, and how the plants grew in different areas. "What are you doing?" asked Nari. "Shouldn't you be worried about survival?" Dong-ho stood up and pointed to a cluster of large, round cacti about 200 meters away. "Those are barrel cacti," he said. "They store water in their bodies. The bigger ones can hold up to 200 liters. The aliens looked confused. Hyun-woo laughed, but it sounded worried. "You want to eat those spiny monsters? They'll tear your mouth apart. And they're probably poisonous," added So-min. Dong-ho shook his head. "Many cacti are safe to eat if you know how to prepare them. They also give water, nutrients, and medicine." He started walking toward the cacti. "My people learned these things over thousands of years. The aliens watched him go. They whispered among themselves. "He's going to get himself killed in the first hour," said Jae-sung. "Should we stop him?" asked Tae-jin. "Let him learn the hard way," said Hyun-woo. "We have real survival gear. We don't need primitive plant knowledge." The aliens set up their high-tech equipment. Hyun-woo had a temperature-control device that kept his crystal body cool. So-min had water recycling gear and humidity collectors. Jae-sung opened a portable shelter with climate control. Nari activated a light filter that made the sun gentler for her energy-based body. Tae-jin turned on a heating unit to keep his blood warm. Meanwhile, Dong-ho reached the cacti. He found a sharp rock and carefully examined the plants. He knew that different types had different uses. Some gave water, some gave food, and some could help with medicine. He selected a large barrel cactus and began working. Using the sharp rock, he carefully cut away the spines from a small section. The aliens watched from their shelter, expecting to see him hurt himself. Instead, Dong-ho skillfully removed a piece of the cactus flesh. Clear liquid dripped out. He caught some in his hands and smelled it. It was fresh water, slightly thick but clean. He took a small sip, then a larger drink. The water was cool and refreshing. It also contained natural sugars that gave him energy. "Impossible," whispered Hyun-woo. "He's actually drinking from that thing." Dong-ho cut more pieces from the cactus, being careful to take only what he needed, and not harm the plant too much. He found that the inner flesh was soft and edible, tasting slightly sweet and very hydrtng. As the day grew hotter, the aliens' equipment began to struggle. Hyun-woo's cooling device made strange noises. So-min's humidity collector was working too hard and using up its power quickly. Jae-sung's shelter was getting overwhelmed by the heat, but Dong-ho seemed comfortable. He had found shade near the cacti and was systematically gathering resources. He collected different types of stones, looking for specific shapes and hardness. He gathered dead plant material and examined animal tracks in the sand. The aliens began to realize that their high-tech gear might not be enough. The desert was harsher than their equipment was designed for, and the human, who they had dismissed as primitive, seemed to understand this environment in ways they could not. As the sun reached its highest point, the temperature climbed past 50 degrees. The aliens huddled in their failing shelter, using up their emergency water supplies faster than planned. Dong-ho sat calmly in the shade of the cacti, methodically working with his stones and plant materials. He wasn't just surviving, he was preparing for the long days ahead. The real test was just beginning. The sun climbed higher into the sky, and the desert became a furnace. By noon, the temperature reached 52 degrees. The sand was so hot it could burn exposed skin in seconds inside their portable shelter. The 5 alien cadets were already in trouble. Hyun-woo's cooling device was making loud grinding noises. His crystal body had small cracks running along his arms where the heat was too much for his internal temperature control. "The thermal regulator is failing," he said, his voice tight with worry. "My species isn't built for these temperature swings. If my body cracks too much, I could lose structural integrity." So-min was in worse shape. Her blue-green skin was becoming pale and dry. She had already drunk half of her emergency water supply, but her body needed constant moisture to function properly. Her large eyes were red and irritated. "I'm losing hydration faster than I can replace it," she said weakly. "My people need to return to water every 12 hours. It's been 8 hours since we landed, and I can feel my organs starting to shut down." Jae-sung's compound eyes were completely overwhelmed by the harsh desert light. He had covered them with his hands, but he could still barely see. His forearms shook as he tried to read his survival computer. "The light spectrum is all wrong," he clicked. "My eyes are designed for the soft light of our cave systems. This solar radiation is like staring into a fusion reactor. I can't process visual data properly." Nari was perhaps suffering the most. As an energy-based being, she needed specific types of light to survive. The brutal desert sun was too intense and had the wrong frequency. Instead of feeding her, it was actually draining her energy. Her golden glow was flickering weakly. "This radiation is toxic to my energy matrix," she said in a fading voice. "It's like trying to eat poison. I'm getting weaker instead of stronger." Taejin was moving so slowly he seemed almost frozen. His reptilian metabolism was designed for steady, moderate temperatures. The extreme heat was making his blood too thick, and his reactions were becoming dangerously slow. "Cold-blooded species aren't meant for these conditions," he said, each word taking effort. "My body temperature is rising too fast. I'm going into thermal shock." The aliens looked at their failing equipment with growing panic. Their high-tech gear was supposed to handle any environment, but the desert was proving too harsh. Circuits were overheating, power cells were draining faster than expected, and filters were getting clogged with sand and dust. Meanwhile, 200 meters away, Dongho was working calmly in the shade of the barrel cacti. He had used his sharp rock to carefully harvest several pieces of cactus flesh. The clear liquid inside was keeping him hydrated, and the sweet pulp was giving him the energy he needed, but he wasn't just drinking and eating. He was studying the cactus carefully, learning how it survived in this harsh place. The thick, waxy skin kept water inside. The spines created tiny shadows that cooled the surface. The roots spread wide and shallow to catch any rain that might fall. "Everything in the desert teaches you how to survive," he said to himself, remembering lessons his grandfather had taught him about desert survival on Earth. "You just have to watch and learn." Dongho noticed the aliens watching him from their shelter. He could see they were struggling, but he also remembered their cruel words from the ship. Still, his human nature made it hard to watch others suffer. He selected a particularly juicy piece of cactus and walked toward their shelter. The aliens looked at him with suspicion and disgust as he approached. "What do you want?" asked Hyung-woo, trying to hide the cracks in his crystal skin. Dongho held out the cactus flesh. Clear water dripped from it. "This has water and nutrients. Your bodies need both." So-min stared at the plant matter with horror. "That's disgusting. It's covered in microscopic spines. It could damage our internal systems." "My people have strict dietary requirements," added Jae-sung. "We can't eat random plant matter like primitive species." Maori flickered weakly. "Energy beings don't consume solid matter. We absorb light frequencies. That plant is useless to me." Taejin was too sluggish to even respond. His eyes were closing as his metabolism slowed down dangerously. Dongho shrugged and ate the cactus flesh himself. The aliens watched in horror as he chewed and swallowed what they considered to be inedible spines and plant matter. But they could see that the liquid was refreshing him, and his energy remained steady while theirs was failing. "How can you eat that?" asked So-min. "Doesn't it hurt?" Dongho shook his head. "You have to remove the spines first and choose the right parts. The inner flesh is soft and safe. My people have eaten cacti for thousands of years." He returned to his work area and continued his preparations. Using his sharp stone, he began to shape other rocks into useful tools. He found a piece of flint that could make sparks. He collected dry plant material that would burn easily. He gathered long, straight sticks that could become spears or shelter supports. As the afternoon wore on, the alien situation became desperate. Hanwoo's cooling device finally stopped working completely. His crystal body was now covered in a network of fine cracks, and he was making small whimpering sounds. So Dashmin had finished her water supply and was starting to show signs of serious dehydration. Her skin was becoming wrinkled and her movements were getting shaky. Jae-sung couldn't open his eyes at all anymore. He was trying to navigate by sound and smell, but his analytical mind was struggling without visual input. Nari was barely glowing at all. Her energy form was becoming translucent, and she could hardly speak above a whisper. Taejin had gone into a state similar to hibernation. His body temperature was too high, and his reptilian brain was shutting down non-essential functions to survive. Their high-tech equipment was failing one by one. Computers were overheating and shutting down. Climate control systems were burning out their circuits. Water recyclers were clogged with sand and couldn't function. The aliens began to realize that their technology was not enough. They had been trained to rely on advanced equipment, but they had never learned basic survival skills. They knew how to operate complex machines, but they didn't understand how to work with natural resources. As the sun began to move toward the western horizon, Dong Ho had created a small collection of useful tools. He had sharp cutting implements, fire-making materials, and digging tools. More importantly, he had identified several different types of useful plants and had mapped the locations of shade and shelter. The aliens watched him with growing respect and fear. They were highly trained military cadets with advanced technology, but they were failing at basic survival. Meanwhile, the human they had dismissed as primitive was thriving in conditions that were defeating their best equipment. "Maybe," whispered So-min, "we should ask for his help." "Never," said Hyun-woo through gritted teeth. "I won't beg a primitive for assistance." But as their situation grew worse and the desert heat continued to drain their strength, the aliens began to wonder if their pride was worth their lives. The human had shown them that there were ways to survive that didn't depend on technology. Night was coming, and with it would come new challenges that their failing equipment couldn't handle. As the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, Dong Ho began working on something that would save all their lives, though the aliens didn't know it yet. He had been exploring the area around the cacti and made an important discovery: scattered across the desert floor were the sun-bleached bones of animals that had died in this harsh place. Most people would see these bones as signs of death and danger, but Dong Ho saw them as gifts. His human ancestors had used animal bones as tools for hundreds of thousands of years. What worked on Earth would work here too. He picked up a large, curved rib bone and tested its strength. It was hard and light, perfect for construction. A long leg bone could become a digging tool or a support beam. Smaller bones could be shaped into cutting tools or needles for sewing. The aliens watched from their failing shelter with disgust and confusion. Hyun-woo's crystal body was covered in cracks now, and his cooling system had completely shut down. He could barely speak without pain. "What is that primitive doing now?" he whispered. So Min squinted through her dry, irritated eyes. "He's collecting dead animal parts. How disgusting." "Unsanitary and illogical," clicked Jae-sung weakly. "Dead organic matter carries bacteria and diseases." Nari flickered so dimly she was almost invisible. "Barbaric behavior. No civilized species touches corpses." Taejin was too far gone to comment. His reptilian body had shut down most functions, and he lay motionless in the shade of their portable shelter. Dong Ho ignored their comments and continued his work. He had found something even more useful: a large animal skull, probably from some kind of desert predator. It was bowl-shaped and would hold water perfectly. He also collected the long, straight ribs from what looked like a large bird or flying creature. These bones were hollow and light but very strong. They would make excellent framework for a shelter, but bones alone wouldn't be enough. Dong Ho turned his attention to the cacti themselves. These plants were perfectly designed for desert survival, and humans had learned to use every part of them. The dead lower sections of the barrel cacti had dried into tough, woody ribs. These natural beams were incredibly strong and could support a lot of weight. Dong Ho carefully harvested several of these cactus ribs, making sure not to damage the living parts of the plants, the flat, paddle-shaped pieces from prickly pear. Cacti could be used as building panels once the spines were removed. Even the long, flexible roots that he dug up could be used as rope or binding material. As Dong Ho worked, the alien situation continued to get worse. Their portable shelter was designed for mild environments, not extreme desert conditions. The fabric walls were thin and provided little insulation. The climate control system had broken down completely, and the interior temperature was rising dangerously. Hyun-woo was making soft crying sounds as more cracks appeared in his crystal skin. "I can't take much more of this heat," he said. "My molecular structure is failing." So-min had curled up in the corner, trying to conserve what little moisture remained in her body. "I'm going to die of dehydration," she whispered. "My organs are shutting down." The alien equipment that had seemed so advanced was proving useless against the desert's fury. Computers were overheating and displaying error messages. Water recyclers had clogged with sand and stopped working. Even their emergency food was spoiling in the heat. Meanwhile, Dongho began constructing something that looked impossible. Using the large animal bones as a framework and the cactus ribs as support beams, he started building a shelter that was much bigger than the aliens. High-tech tent. He dug shallow holes in the sand and planted the larger bones upright like posts. Then he used the cactus ribs to create a slanted roof that would provide maximum shade. The flexible cactus roots became rope that held everything together. The most ingenious part was how he used the natural properties of the materials. The hollow bones allowed air to flow through the structure, creating natural ventilation. The cactus ribs were positioned to catch any breeze and direct it downward into the shelter. The slanted roof created a large area of cool shade that would stay comfortable even in the worst heat. "What is he building?" asked Jae-sung, squinting through his damaged compound eyes. "Some kind of primitive hut," said Hyun-woo dismissively, though his voice was weak with pain. But as the structure took shape, even the aliens could see that it was actually quite sophisticated. The design used principles of airflow, heat reflection, and structural engineering that their own shelter completely lacked. Dong-ho worked steadily through the hottest part of the day. He used flat stones to create a floor that would stay cool. He positioned the shelter to take advantage of natural wind patterns. He even created small trenches around the outside to direct any water that might come from rare desert rains. When he was finished, the shelter was large enough to hold all 6 cadets comfortably. It was also much cooler inside than the aliens. High-tech 10. The temperature difference was at least 10 degrees, which could mean the difference between life and death in the desert, but Dong-ho wasn't done. Using his sharp stone tools, he began crafting implements that would help him survive the coming days. From the animal bones, he shaped a digging tool that could reach deep water sources. He made cutting blades that were sharper than metal. He even created a long spear for protection against desert predators. The skull he had found became a perfect water container. It was naturally shaped to hold liquid and had no cracks or holes. He could use it to collect and store precious water from the cacti or any other sources he might find. The aliens watched in growing amazement and shame. Their advanced education had taught them to operate complex machines and understand sophisticated technology. But none of them knew how to make even the simplest tools by hand. "How does he know how to do all this?" whispered So-min. "Human cultural memory," said Jae-sung, his analytical mind still working despite his physical suffering. "Their species retained ancient survival knowledge even after developing technology." As the sun reached its peak intensity, the temperature inside the aliens' shelter became unbearable. The thin walls provided no real protection, and their broken climate control made the situation worse instead of better. Hyun-woo was the first to break. His crystal body was covered in so many cracks he looked like he might shatter. "I can't survive in here," he said desperately. "The heat is going to kill me." So-min was unconscious from dehydration. Her blue-green skin had turned gray and she was breathing in short, shallow gasps. Tae-jin had gone completely motionless. His reptilian body was in full survival shutdown and it was unclear if he would wake up again. Nari was just a faint shimmer in the air, her energy form barely holding together. Only Jae-sung was still conscious enough to think clearly. His forearms were shaking as he looked out at Dong-ho's shelter. The bone and cactus structure was keeping its interior cool and comfortable while their advanced technology was failing completely. "Maybe," he said quietly, "we need to reconsider our assumptions about primitive versus advanced. The human had turned death into life, bones into tools, and thorny plants into shelter. Using nothing but knowledge passed down through generations and the skill of his own hands, he had created a solution that was better than their most advanced equipment. The real question was whether the aliens' pride would let them ask for help before it was too late. The second day dawned with even more brutal heat than the first. The desert sun rose like an angry red eye, promising temperatures that would test every living thing's will to survive. For the alien cadets, this day would bring their closest brush with death. So Dashmin was unconscious in the corner of their failing shelter. Her blue-green skin had turned a sickly gray color, and her breathing was so shallow it was barely visible. As an aquatic species, she needed constant moisture to keep her organs functioning. The desert was literally drying her from the inside. Out. Hyan Wu knelt beside her, his own crystal body covered in a network of cracks. "She's going into organ failure," he said with growing panic. "Look at her skin, it's losing all elasticity. Her people can only survive 8 hours without proper hydration." Jaesung checked his instruments with shaking hands. "It's been nearly 20 hours since we landed. Her body chemistry is critical. Without immediate water replacement, she'd die within 2 hours." The aliens had rationed their emergency water carefully, but it wasn't enough. The desert heat was making them sweat and breathe out moisture faster than they could replace it. Even their water recycling equipment had failed. Clogged with sand and overheated beyond repair. Taejin remained motionless, his reptilian body locked in survival hibernation. His cold-blooded metabolism couldn't handle the extreme temperatures, and his brain had shut down all non-essential functions. Nari was barely visible, just a faint golden shimmer that flickered weakly in the hot air. The brutal desert sun was poisoning her energy-based biology instead of nourishing it. "We're going to die here," whispered Hyanwu, "all of us. Our equipment has failed, our water is gone, and we don't know how to survive without technology." Outside their collapsing shelter, Dongho was working calmly in the shade of his bone and cactus structure. He had woken before dawn and was already solving the water problem that was killing his teammates, using his bone-digging tool. He carefully excavated around the base of several barrel cacti. These plants were like living water tanks, storing hundreds of liters in their thick flesh. But getting to that water required knowledge and skill that the aliens didn't have. Dong Dasho knew exactly where to cut and how deep to go. He used his sharp stone blade to make precise incisions in the cactus skin, avoiding the areas where the plant stored its vital nutrients. Clear, sweet water began to flow into the skull bowl he had prepared, but he didn't stop there. Dongho had noticed something the aliens missed. Certain areas of the desert showed signs of underground water. Sparse vegetation growing in straight lines indicated buried streams. Slight changes in the sand color meant moisture was close to the surface. He began digging in one of these spots, using his bone tools to reach deep into the sand. 3 feet down, he found what he was looking for, damp earth that contained precious water. He created a simple well, using stones to line the sides and keep sand from filling it back in. The water that seeped into his well was muddy and full of debris, but Dongho had learned to purify water using methods his ancestors had developed thousands of years ago. He created a filtration system using layers of sand, small stones, and activated charcoal made from burned cactus wood. First, he let the muddy water settle in one container, allowing the heaviest particles to sink to the bottom. Then he poured the clearer water through his improvised filter. The sand caught large particles, the stones provided structure, and the charcoal removed toxins and bad tastes. The result was clean, drinkable water that was safer than anything the aliens could produce with their broken machines. As Dongho worked, he could hear the distress sounds coming from the alien shelter. He looked over and saw Hyanwu stumbling outside, his crystal body so cracked it looked like it might shatter with the next step. "Please," Hyanwu called desperately. "Somin is dying. We need water. Our equipment has failed." A crystal being collapsed to his knees in the sand, his pride finally broken by necessity. "I know we said terrible things about your people. I know we called you primitive. But please help us. We don't know how to survive like you do." Dongho looked at the suffering alien. Despite the cruel words they had spoken, he couldn't watch them die. His human compassion was stronger than his hurt feelings. He filled his skull bowl with clean, filtered water and walked over to the alien shelter. The smell that hit him was overwhelming, the stench of failing life support systems, overheated electronics, and the biological stress of creatures dying far from their home environments. So Min was barely breathing. Her large eyes were sunken and dry. Dong-ho knelt beside her and carefully lifted her head. "Small sips," he said gently. "Too much too fast will make her sick." He poured a few drops of water into her mouth. Her throat muscles were so weak she could barely swallow, but the precious liquid began to revive her immediately. Her skin started to regain some of its blue-green color. "How did you get clean water?" asked Jae-sung weakly. "Our purification systems are destroyed." Dong-ho showed them his filtration setup. The aliens stared in amazement at the simple but effective system, made from natural materials. "Sand and charcoal can purify water?" asked Hyun-woo. "Humans have used these methods for thousands of years," Dong-ho explained. "Sometimes the old ways work better than new technology." He taught them how to extract water from different types of cacti, showing them which parts were safe and which could be harmful. He demonstrated how to collect dew using fabric stretched between bones, creating condensation traps that could gather water from the air during the cool desert nights. Most importantly, he showed them how to read the desert itself, the way certain plants grew indicated underground water. The behavior of insects and small animals revealed hidden sources of moisture. Even the patterns of wind and sand movement could lead to water sources. "Your technology tried to fight the desert," Dong-ho explained as he shared his water with the suffering aliens. "But survival means working with the environment, not against it." Jae-sung, the analytical Crix, was fascinated despite his weakness. "Your methods use principles of physics and chemistry that we studied in school, but we never thought to apply them with natural materials." "My people learned by necessity," said Dong-ho. "When your life depends on finding water, you learn to see what others miss." As the day progressed, Dong-ho continued to provide water and teach basic survival skills. He showed them how to create shade using reflective surfaces, how to cool their bodies by wetting certain pressure points, and how to recognize the early signs of heat stroke and dehydration. The aliens began to understand that their technological dependence had made them helpless in situations where the equipment failed. They had advanced degrees in engineering and science, but they couldn't perform the basic tasks that kept people alive. So Min recovered enough to sit up and drink water on her own. "I would have died without your help," she said quietly. "Think. You?" Hyun-woo's crystal cracks stopped spreading once he was properly hydrated and cooled. "I was wrong about humans," he admitted. "Your knowledge isn't primitive. It's more advanced than our technology in ways we never considered." As evening approached, the aliens realized they had learned more about real survival in one day than in years of academy training. But they also knew that the desert still held many more challenges. The night would bring freezing temperatures and dangerous predators. Their electronic equipment was worthless, but they were beginning to understand that the human had solutions for those problems too. For the first time since landing on Zarian 7, the aliens felt hope that they might actually survive the trial. As the sun disappeared behind the western dunes, the desert transformed from a furnace into a freezer. The temperature dropped so fast that frost began forming on the metal parts of the aliens' broken equipment. Within an hour of sunset, the thermometer read -15 degrees. The alien cadets huddled together in their failing shelter, but their heating systems had burned out during the day's extreme heat. The thin walls that couldn't keep out the blazing sun also couldn't keep out the bitter cold. Hyun-woo's crystal body was contracting rapidly as the temperature dropped. His species needed steady temperatures to maintain their molecular structure. The sudden cold was causing new stress fractures to appear alongside the heat cracks from earlier. "I can't handle these temperature swings," he said through chattering crystal formations. "My body is breaking apart from the thermal shock." Somin had recovered some strength from Dong-ho's water, but the cold was almost as dangerous for her as the heat had been. Her aquatic biology was designed for the stable temperatures of deep water, not the wild extremes of desert weather. "My blood is starting to slow down," she whispered, her words creating puffs of vapor in the frigid air. "If it gets much colder, my circulation will stop completely." Jae-sung's insect-like body was going into automatic hibernation mode. His forearms were pulling close to his torso, and his compound eyes were clouding over as his metabolism slowed to conserve energy. "Cold-blooded species enter dormancy in these conditions," he said weakly. "I won't be conscious much longer." Nari was completely invisible now? Energy beings like her couldn't function in extreme cold without an external heat source. She was using the last of her stored energy just to maintain basic life functions. Taejin remained unconscious, but his reptilian body was shutting down even further. His breathing became so slow, it was hard to tell if he was still alive. Outside their shelter, they could hear new sounds that chilled them more than the cold air, the howling and clicking noises of desert, predators waking up for their nightly hunt. "What are those sounds?" asked So-min fearfully. Through gaps in their shelter walls, they could see glowing eyes moving in the darkness. Large shapes prowled around their camp, drawn by the scent of weakness and desperation. Meanwhile, Dong-ho was working calmly in his bone and cactus shelter. He had spent the late afternoon preparing for the cold night, gathering the materials he would need to keep warm and safe, using his fire-making tools. He created a small but efficient fire pit. He had collected dry cactus wood, animal droppings that burned cleanly, and tinder made from the fluffy interior of certain desert plants. His sharp stone could strike sparks from flint, and he had the skill to nurture those sparks into flames. The fire provided immediate warmth, but Dong-ho made it serve multiple purposes. He positioned reflective stones around it to direct heat throughout his shelter. He created a small chimney system using hollow bones to control the smoke and prevent dangerous buildup, but the fire did something even more important. It kept the predators away. The alien cadets watched in amazement as the glowing eyes in the darkness moved away from Dong-ho's area and began circling their shelter instead. The predators could sense that the aliens were weak and helpless, while the human was alert and dangerous. "Why aren't those creatures attacking him?" whispered Hyun-woo. "Fire," said Jae-sung, his analytical mind still working despite the cold. "Most predators have instinctive fear of flames. It's been an effective deterrent across thousands of species and worlds." As if summoned by their words, the first predator appeared clearly in their view. It was a sandrunner, a wolf-like creature, the size of a large bear. Its thick fur was perfectly adapted for the desert's temperature extremes, and its powerful jaws could crush bones with ease. The sandrunner sniffed around their shelter, testing for weaknesses. Behind it, they could see more pairs of glowing eyes approaching. The pack had found what they thought would be easy prey. The aliens had no weapons and no way to defend themselves. Their energy weapons had failed along with everything else electronic. They were completely helpless against natural predators, but Dong-ho was ready, using his bone tools. He had crafted several spears with sharp stone points. He knew that in the desert night, the difference between predator and prey often came down to who had better weapons and the will to use them. When the first sandrunner approached his shelter, Dong-ho stepped out boldly with a spear in each hand. The firelight behind him made his shadow look huge and threatening. He shouted in a loud, aggressive voice that echoed across the dunes. The sound was pure human, the war cry of a species that had fought its way to the top of the food chain. On a deadly planet, it carried thousands of years of human determination and refusal to be prey. The sandrunner stopped and backed away, confused. This small creature wasn't acting like food. It was acting like a predator. Dong-ho advanced, keeping his spears ready and his voice loud and confident. He had learned from his ancestors that most predators would retreat if faced with confident resistance. They preferred easy meals to dangerous fights. The pack leader tested him with a mock charge, rushing forward and then stopping to see if he would run. Instead, Dong-ho stood his ground and thrust his spear toward the creature's face. The sharp stone point glittered in the firelight. The sandrunner decided this prey was, too, dangerous and gave a howling signal to the rest of the pack. They melted back into the darkness, looking for easier targets, but they didn't go far. The aliens in their failing shelter were still helpless and afraid. The predators began circling closer to them, drawn by the scent of fear and weakness. "They're coming for us," whispered So-Min. The first Sandrunner began testing the walls of their shelter, looking for ways to get inside. The thin fabric walls wouldn't stop determined predators for long. That's when Dong-Ho made a decision that would change everything between him and the alien cadets. Despite their earlier cruelty and dismissive words, he couldn't stand by and watch them be torn apart by predators. He grabbed several of his bone spears and ran toward the alien shelter, shouting his human war cry. The sound startled the Sandrunners and made them turn toward this new threat. Dong-Ho positioned himself between the predators and the alien shelter. He held his spears ready and kept his fire burning bright behind him. To the Sandrunners, he looked like a much larger and more dangerous creature than he really was. "Stay back," he shouted to the aliens. "Don't make any sudden movements." The pack leader approached Dong-Ho cautiously. It was larger and stronger than him, but the human showed no fear. His steady stance and ready weapons made the predator uncertain. When the Sandrunner got too close, Dong-Ho struck with his spear. The stone point scratched the creature's muzzle, drawing blood. The predator yelped and jumped back, more surprised than hurt, but the message was clear: this human would fight, and he had weapons that could cause real damage. The aliens watched in stunned silence as Dong-Ho faced down an entire pack of predators to protect them. The same people who had called him primitive and worthless were being saved by his courage and ancient human fighting instincts. The standoff continued for what felt like hours. The Sandrunners tested Dong-Ho's defenses several more times, but each time he drove them back with his spears and his fearless determination. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, the pack gave up and retreated to their daytime hiding places. The danger was over. Dong-Ho lowered his spears and walked back to his shelter. He was exhausted from the night-long guard duty, but he had kept all 6 cadets alive through the desert's deadliest hours. The aliens stared at him with new understanding. This human hadn't just survived the night, he had protected all of them at great risk to himself. "Why did you help us?" asked Tianwu quietly. "After the things we said about your people?" Dong-Ho looked at the crystal being with tired but kind eyes. "Because that's what humans do," he said simply. "We protect others even when they're not kind to us." The second night was over, but the aliens knew they had witnessed something extraordinary. The primitive human had shown them what real strength looked like. The third day dawned with the aliens facing a new crisis: starvation. Their emergency food supplies had been designed for 24 hours, and much of it had spoiled in the extreme heat. The small rations that remained were barely enough to keep one person alive, let alone 5. So-Min was the first to admit their desperate situation. "Our food is gone," she said weakly. "The heat ruined most of it on the first day, and we ate the rest yesterday, trying to stay alive." Henwu's crystal body was flickering dimly. His species absorbed nutrients through their crystalline structure, but they needed specially prepared mineral solutions that were nowhere to be found in the desert. "I haven't eaten properly since we landed," he said. "My molecular matrix is breaking down without proper nutrients. I can feel myself getting weaker every hour." Jae-sung, despite his analytical nature, was struggling with the most basic problem of all. The crick species requires specific protein combinations that exist only in our homeworld's ecosystem. We can't survive on random organic matter. Nari was barely visible, her energy form reduced to a faint shimmer. Energy beings need particular light frequencies for nourishment. This sun's radiation is toxic to me instead of nutritious. Taejin had regained consciousness with the sunrise, but his reptilian metabolism was demanding food after the stress of the previous days. His species needed regular protein intake to maintain their strength. The aliens looked at their situation with growing despair. They had advanced training in technology and warfare, but none of them knew how to find food in a natural environment. Their education had focused on using prepared supplies and manufactured nutrition, not on foraging and hunting. Meanwhile, Dong-Ho had been awake since before dawn, already working on solving the food problem. He understood that in the desert, everything that lived was potential nourishment. If you knew how to find it and prepare it safely, he started by examining the sand around their camp area. To the aliens, it looked empty and lifeless. But Dong Ho's trained eyes could see the subtle signs of life everywhere. Small holes in the sand marked insect burrows. Tiny tracks showed where beetles and other creatures had passed during the night. Disturbed areas indicated places where larger animals had dug for food or water using his bone-digging tools. Dong Ho carefully excavated several insect burrows. He found fat, white grubs that were rich in protein and surprisingly tasty when cooked properly. Desert ants had stored seeds and other food in underground chambers. Even the larvae of flying insects provided valuable nutrition. The aliens watched with horror and fascination as he collected what they considered to be disgusting bugs and worms. "You're going to eat those?" asked So Min with revulsion. "Insects are excellent protein sources," Dong Ho explained patiently. "Many human cultures consider them delicacies. They're actually cleaner and safer than most other meat sources." But Dong Ho didn't stop with insects. He began examining the desert plants more carefully, looking for hidden sources of nutrition that the aliens had never considered. The barrel cacti provided more than just water. Their fruits, when in season, were sweet and nutritious. The young pads of prickly pear cacti could be eaten like vegetables once the spines were carefully removed. Even the flowers of certain cacti were edible and provided important vitamins. Dong Ho found root systems that stored energy-rich starches underground. He located desert trees that produced edible nuts and berries. He even identified certain types of desert grass whose seeds could be ground into nutritious flour. "The desert isn't empty," he explained to the watching aliens. "It's full of food if you know where to look and how to prepare it safely." The aliens were amazed at the variety of food sources Dong Ho could identify in what they had thought was a barren wasteland. But they were still hesitant to try eating what looked like weeds and bugs to their alien sensibilities. That's when Taejin made a terrible mistake. The reptilian cadet was so hungry that he grabbed a colorful desert plant and began eating it, without asking Dong Ho first. Within minutes he was writhing in agony, his scales turning dark colors as poison coursed through his system. "Help me!" he gasped, foam appearing around his mouth. "Something's wrong. I can't breathe properly." The aliens panicked. Their medical equipment had failed along with everything else electronic. They had no idea how to treat poisoning without their advanced medical technology, but Dong Ho acted quickly and calmly. He had seen this type of poisoning before and knew exactly what to do. First, he identified the plant Taejin had eaten, a bright red flowering shrub that looked harmless but contained powerful toxins. Many desert plants use bright colors and sweet taste to protect themselves from being eaten. "Hold him still," Dong Ho ordered the other aliens. "I need to get the poison out of his system before it reaches his heart." Using knowledge passed down through generations of human survival experience, Dong Ho quickly prepared an antidote from other desert plants. He found a specific type of cactus that contained natural compounds that could neutralize the toxins Taejin had consumed. He crushed the cactus flesh and mixed it with clean water, creating a bitter but life-saving medicine. Then he forced the mixture down Taejin's throat, despite the reptilian struggles and protests. "This tastes horrible," Taejin gagged. "Medicine usually does," said Dong Ho firmly, "but it's going to save your life." Within an hour, Taejin's condition began to improve. His scales returned to their normal color, and his breathing became easier. The natural antidote was working. The aliens stared at Dong Ho with new amazement and respect. He had just performed emergency medicine using nothing but desert plants and traditional knowledge. "How did you know how to do that?" asked Jae-sung. "My people have been treating plant poisoning for thousands of years," Dong Ho explained. "We learned which plants cure and which plants kill through trial and experience." He began teaching them the basic principles of desert plant medicine. Certain cacti could treat infections and wounds. Others could ease pain and reduce fever. Some could even help with digestion problems caused by eating unfamiliar foods. "Every ecosystem has its own natural pharmacy," he said. "You just have to learn how to read it." As Taejin recovered, the other aliens finally overcame their disgust and began trying the foods Dongho had prepared. The roasted insects were crunchy and nutty tasting. The cactus fruits were sweet and refreshing. The plant roots provided filling, starchy nutrition. Even more importantly, Dongho showed them how to identify safe foods versus dangerous ones. He taught them to look for signs that animals had been eating certain plants, which usually meant they were safe for other species too. He showed them how to test small amounts of new foods before eating larger quantities. Survival isn't just about finding food, he explained. It's about finding the right food that won't make you sick or kill you. So Min was amazed to discover that some desert plants could provide the mineral salts her aquatic biology needed. Han Wu found that certain crystalline formations in the rocks contained trace elements his species required. Even Nari benefited when Dongho showed her how to use polished stones and water to create gentler, more suitable light frequencies that could nourish her energy form without causing damage. By the end of the day, all the aliens had eaten their first real meal since landing on the desert planet. More importantly, they had learned that survival wasn't about having the most advanced equipment. It was about understanding and working with the natural world. "I owe you my life," said Taejin gratefully. "Without your medicine, I would have died from that poison." "We all owe him our lives," added Hyun-woo quietly, "multiple times over." As night approached again, the aliens realized that Dongho had taught them more about real survival in 3 days than they had learned in years of academy training. But they also knew that their biggest test was still ahead of them. The final night would bring challenges that would test everything they had learned about working together and trusting in human wisdom. The morning of the third day brought an ominous change in the desert atmosphere. The sky, which had been clear blue for 2 days, was now filled with dark, swirling clouds on the western horizon. The wind was picking up, carrying with it the smell of distant rain and the electric feeling that preceded dangerous weather. Dongho stood outside his shelter, watching the approaching storm with serious concern. His human ancestors had learned to read weather patterns as a matter of survival, and what he saw coming was one of the desert's most deadly phenomena, a haboob, a massive sandstorm that could last for hours and bury anything in its path. The alien cadets were finally starting to feel confident about their survival. They had learned to find water, identify food, and work together. Somin was properly hydrated, Hanwoo's crystal body had stabilized, and Taejin had fully recovered from his poisoning incident. Even Nari was maintaining a steady glow using Dongho's modified light techniques. "Look at us," said Jae-sung with satisfaction. "We're actually surviving this trial. Our technology may have failed, but we've learned to adapt." "The pickup is tomorrow morning," added So-min happily. "We just need to get through one more night." But Dongho's expression was grim as he studied the approaching storm. "We have a serious problem," he announced, gathering the aliens around him. "There's a major sandstorm coming. It's going to hit us in about 2 hours." The aliens looked at the distant clouds with curiosity rather than concern. They had never experienced a desert sandstorm and didn't understand the danger. "How bad could it be?" asked Hyun-woo. "It's just wind and sand, right?" Dongho shook his head. "Desert sandstorms can kill you in several ways. The sand moves so fast it can strip skin from bone. The wind can knock you down and bury you alive. The static electricity can interfere with breathing. And the temperature drops so fast you can freeze to death even if you survive everything else." He pointed to the approaching wall of darkness. "That storm is at least 3 kilometers high and probably 50 kilometers wide. It's moving at over 100 kilometers per hour. When it hits, visibility will be 0 and the air will be like breathing liquid sand." The aliens began to understand the seriousness of their situation. Their flimsy shelter would be destroyed in minutes by winds that strong. Their broken equipment couldn't help them. And they had nowhere to run? The storm was too large and moving too fast to escape? "What do we do?" asked So-min with growing fear. "We need better shelter," said Dongho. Something that can withstand the wind and keep the sand out. He began working frantically, using every skill and technique he had learned from human survival traditions. The bone and cactus shelter that had served them well for heat and cold wouldn't be nearly strong enough for what was coming. Dong Ho started by finding the lowest point in their area, a natural depression in the sand that would provide some protection from the wind. Then he began reinforcing his existing shelter with additional materials. He drove the largest bones deeper into the sand, creating anchor points that could resist the storm's pull. He wove flexible cactus roots and plant fibers into a tight net that could flex with the wind instead of breaking. He used flat stones to create windbreaks and sand deflectors, but the most ingenious part of his storm shelter was how he used the desert's own properties against itself. He created a design that would actually use the storm's force to make the structure stronger. The wind would be channeled around and over the shelter, creating a pocket of calm air inside. The aliens watched in amazement as Dong Ho transformed their simple shelter into what looked like a sophisticated piece of engineering. But he was working. Against time, the storm was approaching faster than expected. "I need help," he said urgently. "All of you need to work together if we're going to finish this in time." The aliens immediately jumped to help. Haiyan Wu used his crystal body's strength to hold heavy bones in place while Dong Ho secured them. Somin's water abilities helped pack sand and mud into gaps. Jae Sung's 4 arms and analytical mind made him excellent at weaving the binding materials. Nari used her energy form to weld stone pieces together with focused heat. Even Taejin's reptilian strength was useful for moving large rocks. As they worked together, the aliens realized something important. Each of their species had unique abilities that could contribute to survival. But it took human leadership and knowledge to coordinate their efforts effectively. "Why didn't we think to work together like this before?" asked Haiyan Wu as he helped position a crucial support beam. "Because we were too busy competing instead of cooperating," said Jae Sung. "Humans seem to understand naturally that survival depends on teamwork." The storm wall was visible now, a towering brown mass that blocked out the sun and turned day into night. The wind was already picking up dramatically, and the first sand particles were beginning to sting their skin. "Everyone inside now!" shouted Dong Ho over the growing roar of the approaching storm. The 6 cadets crowded into the reinforced shelter just as the storm's leading edge hit their camp. The sound was incredible, like standing inside a waterfall or next to a spacecraft engine. The wind howled and screamed as it tore across the desert, carrying millions of tons of sand and debris. Inside the shelter, the aliens huddled together in the darkness. Their high-tech equipment had failed completely, but Dong Ho's ancient human techniques were keeping them alive. The shelter flexed and groaned under the storm's assault, but it held together. Outside, they could hear the remains of their original alien shelter being torn apart and scattered across the desert. Their broken equipment was being sandblasted into pieces and buried under tons of sand, but Dong Ho's design was working perfectly. The wind flowed around and over their shelter instead of trying to destroy it. The carefully positioned stones deflected the worst of the sandblasting. The flexible materials bent with the storm instead of breaking. "It's actually working," whispered Somin in amazement. "We're safe in here." The storm raged for 6 hours. During that time, the temperature dropped 30 degrees. The wind never fell below 80 kilometers per hour, and visibility outside remained at 0. Any creature caught in the open would have died within minutes, but inside their shelter, the alien cadets were warm, dry, and safe. They had water from Dong Ho's collection systems, food from his foraging, and protection from his engineering. More importantly, they had learned to work together as a team. "I understand now," said Taijin during a quiet moment in the storm. "Humans weren't included in the Galactic Defense Academy because you have advanced technology. You were included because you have something more important, the ability to adapt and survive in any situation. And the wisdom to lead others through crisis," added Nari. "You could have built a shelter just for yourself, but you made sure all of us would survive." Haiyan Wu nodded. "We called your people primitive, but we were wrong. What you have is more advanced than any technology. It's the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of evolution and survival. As the storm finally began to weaken, the aliens realized that they had been fundamentally changed by their experience. They had started the trial believing that advanced technology and superior abilities made them better than humans, but they were ending it with a deep respect for human ingenuity, leadership, and compassion. "When we get back to the academy," said Jae-sung, "I'm going to recommend that survival training be completely redesigned. Every cadet should learn these human techniques." Dong-ho smiled quietly in the darkness. "Survival isn't about being the strongest or having the best equipment," he said. "It's about understanding your environment, working with others, and never giving up hope." The storm was passing, but the lessons it had taught would last forever. The aliens had learned that true strength came not from technology or individual abilities, but from wisdom, cooperation, and the determination to protect others. Tomorrow would bring rescue, but tonight had brought something more valuable: genuine respect and friendship between species who had started as rivals. The morning of the fourth day dawned clear and bright, as if the massive sandstorm had never happened. The desert air was crisp and clean, washed by the winds that had nearly killed them all. The 6 cadets emerged from their shelter into a landscape that had been completely transformed by the storm. Where their original camp had been, there was now only smooth sand. The aliens' high-tech equipment had vanished completely, either buried under meters of sand or scattered across hundreds of kilometers of desert. No trace remained of the advanced technology they had depended on for survival, but Dong-ho's bone and cactus shelter stood intact, its clever design having turned the storm's fury into structural strength. Around it, his water collection systems were already gathering the precious moisture that the storm had brought. His food storage areas were protected and undamaged. "Look at that," said Hyun-woo in amazement, his crystal body catching the morning light. "Everything we brought is gone?" But the humans' primitive shelter survived a storm that destroyed our advanced equipment. So-min knelt beside one of Dong-ho's water collection systems and watched clean, fresh water dripping into the stone containers. "Not primitive," she said softly. "Sophisticated. We just didn't understand the sophistication." The sound of approaching aircraft interrupted their conversation. 3 rescue shuttles appeared on the horizon, right on schedule for the pickup. That would end their trial. The aliens felt a mixture of relief and sadness, relief that they had survived, but sadness that their incredible learning experience was coming to an end. As the shuttles landed, Commander Yi-jun and Instructor Yoon-hee stepped out, followed by medical teams and debriefing specialists. They expected to find 6 exhausted cadets barely hanging on to life after 3 days in one of the galaxy's harshest environments. Instead, they found something completely unexpected: the 5 alien cadets looked healthy and alert. They moved with confidence and displayed none of the desperate exhaustion that usually marked desert survival trials. More remarkable still, they were gathered around what appeared to be a thriving camp made entirely from natural materials. "Commander." Yi-jun walked slowly around Dong-ho's construction, his experienced eyes taking in every detail. As a veteran of dozens of survival situations, he could recognize masterful engineering when he saw it. "Cadet Dong-ho," he said formally, "please explain this structure." Dong-ho stood at attention. "Sir, it's a multi-purpose shelter designed for extreme desert conditions. The framework uses animal bones for strength and flexibility. Cactus ribs provide insulation and wind resistance. The shape channels airflow for cooling and heating as needed. And these?" The commander pointed to the water collection systems. "Precipitation. Traps and filtration systems, sir. They collect moisture from air, dew, and rare rainfall, then purify it using natural sand and charcoal filtration." Instructor Yoon-hee, herself a human, was examining the bone tools with growing amazement. "These implements, they're incredibly sophisticated. This cutting blade is sharper than our manufactured knives." "Napstone technology, ma'am. The techniques are tens of thousands of years old, but the principles are still effective." The medical teams were running quick health checks on all the cadets. To their surprise, everyone was in excellent condition. Proper hydration, adequate nutrition, and effective shelter had kept them all healthy throughout the ordeal, but it was the aliens' behavior that surprised the rescue team most. Instead of complaining about their suffering or bragging about their endurance, they were eagerly explaining everything Dong Ho had taught them. "Commander," said Jae-sung excitedly, "you need to understand what happened here. We thought we knew about survival because we had advanced equipment. But when our technology failed, we would have died without Cadet Dong Ho's knowledge. He didn't just keep himself alive," added So-min. "He saved all of us multiple times. Water, food, shelter, medicine, protection from predators, everything we needed came from his understanding of natural survival." Hyun-woo stepped forward, his crystal body gleaming with health. "Sir, I formally request that my previous statements about human capabilities be removed from my record. They were based on ignorance and prejudice." "We all do," said Tae-jin firmly. "We called humans primitive, but we were the ones who were ignorant." Commander Yi-jin looked at the assembled cadets with growing understanding. This trial had been designed to test individual survival skills, but it had become something much more important, a lesson in interspecies cooperation and the value of diverse knowledge. "Cadet Dong Ho," he said, "in your opinion, what was the most important factor in your team's survival?" Dong Ho considered the question carefully. "Sir, I believe it was learning to combine our different strengths. My species brought traditional survival knowledge, but each of the other cadets contributed unique abilities that made our survival more effective." "Explain." Cadet Hyun-woo's crystal strength was crucial for construction. Cadet So-min's water affinity improved our hydration systems. Cadet Jae-sung's analytical abilities helped optimize our resource gathering. Cadet Nari's energy manipulation assisted with tool-making. Cadet Tae-jin's physical power enabled us to move heavy materials. Nari flickered brightly with pride. But none of our abilities would have mattered without human leadership and knowledge. Dong Ho knew how to coordinate our efforts and taught U.S. skills we never imagined existed. Instructor Yoon-hee was documenting everything with obvious excitement. This is exactly what the Galactic Defense Academy hoped to achieve by including humans in the program. Not because humans have superior technology, but because human survival instincts and adaptability make us valuable partners. Commander Yi-jun nodded slowly. The galaxy faces threats that can't always be solved with advanced technology. Sometimes survival depends on basic skills, creative thinking, and the ability to work with limited resources. He turned to address all 6 cadets. "You've learned something here that goes beyond survival training. You've learned that every species brings unique strengths to the galactic community. The key is learning to recognize and combine those strengths effectively." As they prepared to board the rescue shuttles, the aliens made sure to carefully collect samples of Dong Ho's tools and construction techniques. They wanted to study and preserve the knowledge he had shared with them. "I want to learn more about human survival techniques," said Jae-sung. "There must be thousands of methods and principles that could benefit all species." "The Academy should establish an exchange program," suggested So-min. "Humans could teach survival skills while learning advanced technology from other species." Hyun-woo was examining one of the bone-cutting tools with fascination. "This is as effective as anything our manufacturers produce, but it's made from materials anyone can find. The implications for emergency situations are enormous." As the shuttles lifted off, carrying them back to the Academy, the aliens spent the flight learning more about human survival philosophy. Dong Ho explained how his people had developed techniques for every environment on Earth: Arctic survival, jungle survival, ocean survival, mountain survival. "Humans are the only species we've encountered that evolved to thrive in multiple environments," noted Commander Yi-jun. "Most species adapt to one specific ecological niche, but humans learn to survive anywhere. That's why you're valuable to the galactic community," added Instructor Yoon-hee. "When we encounter new worlds or face unexpected challenges, human Adaptability and survival knowledge become critical assets. Nari flickered thoughtfully. We spent so much time thinking about technological advancement that we forgot the importance of fundamental survival skills. Humans maintained that knowledge even while developing space travel. The flight back to the academy was filled with planning and excitement. The aliens were eager to share their new knowledge with other cadets. They wanted to establish survival training programs that combined human techniques with alien abilities, but most importantly, they had gained something invaluable, genuine, respect for human capabilities and a deep understanding that strength comes in many forms. When they arrived at the academy, news of their successful trial had already spread. Other cadets gathered to hear about their experience. Amazed that all 6 had survived in excellent health, the alien cadets made sure that Dong-ho received full credit for their survival. They testified that without human knowledge and leadership, they would have died on the first day. Their testimony led to major changes in academy, training programs, and a new appreciation for the diverse strengths that different species brought to the galactic community. Years later, when they had all become senior officers in the Galactic Defense Force, the 5 alien cadets would still credit their survival trial as the most important learning experience of their lives. Not because it taught them to survive in a desert, but because it taught them to respect and value the unique wisdom that every species could contribute. And Dong-ho, the human they had once dismissed as primitive, became one of the most respected survival instructors in the galaxy, teaching countless cadets that true strength comes not from advanced technology, but from knowledge, cooperation, and the determination to protect others. The desert trial had ended, but the lessons learned there would guide the Galactic Defense Force for generations to come.